I'm Sarah, 32 years old. The day I waved my MIT acceptance letter in front of my father, he didn't even look up, just said, "Smart girls don't become engineers. Find a husband." 15 years later, at Thanksgiving dinner, after he'd cut me out of his will and my brother had slapped me in front of everyone, that was the moment I realized I needed to show my family that the daughter they'd abandoned had built something bigger than their empire. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. Let me quickly tell you why I left in the first place. Growing up in the Mitchell family meant traditional gender roles weren't just preferred. They were law. My father, Robert Mitchell, had built a chain of car dealerships across the region, and every conversation at the dinner table circled back to sales numbers, market competition, and succession. My career will be further enhanced by my boys. My boys, always my boys. Never my children or my kids or even my family. I had two brothers, Michael, 6 years older, groomed from day one to inherit the business, and David, 4 years younger, the charming golden boy who everyone adored. And then there was me, Sarah, the daughter who showed an early obsession with computers and robotics, an interest no one in my family knew how to nurture, and worse, an interest they didn't think mattered. I remember being 10 years old, staying up late in my room soldering pieces of scrap metal into a makeshift robot arm. When I showed it off at breakfast, proud of the fact it could actually grip a spoon, my father laughed, clapped Michael on the back, and said, "That's cute, Sarah, but maybe next time you should build something useful for the dealership. Whenever you showed interest in anything tech-related, you should focus on finding a good husband who can provide for you." This was 2008, not 1958, but my father's worldview remained frozen in time when it came to women's roles. A daughter's ambitions, no matter how bright, were just a side note compared to a son's expected destiny. My mother, Linda, once a teacher, had long since settled into being a homemaker. She would give me sympathetic glances across the table, but never raised her voice against my father. She came from a generation of women who stood behind their husbands, behind, not beside. I found my refuge in our high school's computer lab. While Michael and David were sitting in on dealership meetings, learning about customer retention strategies and quarterly projections, I was teaching myself programming languages and building my first websites. The lab stayed open late, and I'd often be the last student there, working on code until the janitor kicked me out. My computer science teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was literally the first adult in my life who saw any real potential in what I was doing. "Sarah," she told me during my senior year, her eyes lighting up as she watched me debug a particularly complex piece of code. "You could genuinely change the world with this stuff. You have something special here." Those words meant everything to me. Someone finally saw what I saw. That technology wasn't just about computers and gadgets, but about solving real problems and helping real people. When that MIT acceptance letter arrived in our mailbox, I was practically bouncing off the walls. Computer science at MIT. It was everything I had dreamed of since I was 14 years old. I remember running into the house, waving the letter above my head like it was a winning lottery ticket. My father's reaction was immediate and devastating. "MIT? In Massachusetts? That's absolutely ridiculous, Sarah. The family business is right here in Texas." I remember sitting in his office, this dark, wood-paneled room that always smelled like expensive leather and disappointment, practically begging him to help with the tuition. The walls were covered with awards from the local Chamber of Commerce and photos of him shaking hands with politicians, all celebrating his business success. His desk was this massive mahogany thing that made him look like a judge about to pass sentence. "Dad, please. This is my dream. This is what I want to do with my entire life." He didn't even bother looking up from the stack of invoices he was signing, just kept scrawling his signature like I wasn't even sitting there, like my dreams were no more important than the paperwork scattered across his desk. "Your brothers need business degrees so they can take over the company properly. That's where the family money needs to go. Your computer thing?" He finally glanced up, and his eyes were so cold they could have frozen water. "It's just a hobby, Sarah. Smart girls become teachers or nurses, not engineers. You know that feeling when someone punches you directly in the stomach and all the air leaves your lungs? That's exactly what those words felt like. But instead of crying, which is probably what he expected, I just sat there and nodded slowly. "Okay," I said, my voice steady despite the tears I was fighting back. I'll figure it out myself then. And you know what? I did exactly that. I deferred my MIT admission for an entire year and worked 3 jobs simultaneously. I saved every single penny I earned. I opened a separate savings account that I called my Freedom Fund and watched the balance grow dollar by painful dollar. I took out student loans that would have made any reasonable person weep with terror, the kind of debt that would follow me for decades. I applied for every scholarship I could find, writing essays until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned, crafting the perfect narrative of a determined young woman who wouldn't let financial obstacles stop her dreams. And somehow, miraculously, I made it to MIT. Those 4 years were brutal. While my roommates were partying and joining sororities, I was working midnight to 6 a.m. security shifts just to cover books and lab fees. I'd shower, head straight to my 8 a.m. computer science classes, and run on 4 hours of sleep and cheap caffeine. Most days I survived on ramen, free food from campus events, and the kindness of professors. I rotated the same few outfits, washing and mending them until they could barely hold together. But I graduated summa cum laude in 2014 with a degree in computer science and artificial intelligence. I had job offers from Google, Apple, Microsoft. Literally all the tech giants you could name were trying to recruit me. The irony wasn't lost on me that these companies saw value in what my own family had dismissed as a hobby. Instead of taking the safe, high-paying corporate job, I chose this tiny startup in Seattle called Innovate Lab because I wanted to learn how to build something from absolutely nothing. Because deep down, I had this burning, desperate need to prove that the kid they'd written off as a dreamer could create something bigger and more meaningful than a chain of car dealerships. The startup was run out of a converted warehouse in South Lake Union, back before that neighborhood became the tech capital it is today. There were maybe 15 of us total, working on folding tables and sleeping on couches when deadlines got tight. The pay was barely enough to cover rent on a studio apartment I shared with 2 other girls, but I was learning everything: product development, user experience, business strategy, fundraising. Meanwhile, back in Austin, Michael and David slipped into their predetermined roles, like they were trying on perfectly tailored suits that had been waiting for them their entire lives. Every phone call with my mom was just an endless update on their latest promotions, their brilliant business insights, their inevitable march toward inheriting everything Dad had built. Michael just closed the biggest fleet sale in company history, she'd tell me during our weekly conversations. Your father is so proud. He says Michael has the best business mind he's ever seen. And David got promoted to sales manager last month. He's only 26. The customers absolutely love him. Your father thinks he could be running the whole operation by the time he's 30. The contrast was, well, let's just say it was highly motivating. While they were being celebrated for following a path that had been laid out for them since birth, I was creating my own path from scratch, with no safety net and no family support. 3 years ago, Christmas 2021, I made what I now realize was a huge mistake. I decided to go home for the holidays. I'd just landed this major partnership for my company, HealthBot AI, this artificial intelligence platform that helps people access mental health support when they need it most. We'd signed a contract with a major hospital system in California. Our user base was growing by 20% month over month. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely proud of what I'd managed to build. I was excited to share this success with my family. I thought maybe, finally, they'd see that I'd been right all along, that my computer hobby had become something real and valuable and important. Sitting around that familiar dining room table, though, surrounded by the same china patterns and family photos I'd grown up with, absolutely nothing had changed. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't even there, focusing entirely on dealership business and local Austin gossip. So, Sarah, Michael said during the main course, cutting into his turkey with this surgical precision that somehow felt aggressive, still playing doctor with your little app. The dismissive tone hit me like a slap. It's not playing, I replied, trying desperately to keep my voice level and professional. We're helping thousands of people access mental health care who wouldn't otherwise have any options. David let out this laugh, the exact same dismissive sound I remembered from childhood, when he'd caught me reading computer programming books instead of fashion magazines. Come on, sis. Dad built something real here. Actual cars, actual profits, actual jobs for real people in our community. Your digital stuff. He waved his fork around in the air like he was conducting an orchestra of condescension. It's just not the same thing, you know? Dad nodded like David had just delivered some profound wisdom from the mountaintop. Your brothers understand what real business looks like. They're building on something solid, something tangible that people can touch and drive. Maybe it's time you stopped chasing these Silicon Valley fantasies and found yourself a nice man who can take proper care of you. That's the exact moment when I completely lost it. Maybe it's time you recognize that I've built something you could never even dream of creating. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Michael's fork stopped halfway to his mouth, a piece of turkey dangling from the end. David's eyes went wide, like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. Dad's face turned this interesting shade of red that I'd never seen before, somewhere between embarrassment and rage. Michael was the first one to explode. He shot up from his chair so fast it nearly tipped over backward. Don't you dare disrespect this family and everything we've built here. He was pointing his finger directly in my face, his voice getting louder and more aggressive with each word. You think you're better than us because you live in Seattle and play around with computers? You're nothing, Sarah. You're a complete failure who's pretending to be an entrepreneur. The words hit like physical blows. I could feel my face burning with humiliation and rage, but I forced myself to stay seated, to maintain some dignity. Dad slammed his hand down on the table so hard the wine glasses jumped, and Jessica's water cup fell over, spilling across the white tablecloth. That's enough! Sarah, you will not disrespect this family in my house. I grabbed my purse and stood up slowly, my hands shaking slightly. This isn't a family. This is a business with shared DNA. I drove straight to the airport that night, didn't even bother packing the rest of my stuff from my childhood bedroom, just left it all behind and caught the red-eye flight back to Seattle. I cried the entire way home, mourning not just the fight, but the final death of any hope that my family would ever see me as anything more than a disappointment. For the next 3 years, my contact with the Mitchell family was basically limited to guilt-inducing Christmas cards and the occasional text message from Mom asking when I was coming home to visit. They had absolutely no idea that during the pandemic, HealthBot AI had completely exploded in growth. They didn't know about our Series A funding round that brought in $20 million from top-tier venture capital firms. They had no clue about our Series B that raised $50 million and valued our company at over $200 million. They definitely didn't know about the intense acquisition talks that had been happening throughout 2024 with some of the biggest tech companies in the world. And they absolutely, positively had no idea that in October 2024, tech giant MindCorp had acquired HealthBot AI for $2.8 billion in cash and stock, making me one of the youngest female billionaires in American history. Which brings us to last month's Thanksgiving disaster. Sarah, honey, please come home for Thanksgiving this year. My mom's voice was shaky and desperate when she called me in early November, the same pleading tone she'd used when I was a teenager and had locked myself in my room after another fight with Dad about my future. It's been 3 years since we've all been together as a family. Your father misses you terribly, even if he's too stubborn and proud to admit it. Michael asks about you all the time. David keeps saying he wishes he could take back what happened last time. I almost said no immediately. I had every single reason in the world to say no. But something in her voice, maybe it was desperation, maybe it was hope, maybe it was just a mother's love that never gives up on her children, made me pause and actually consider it. Okay, Mom, I'll be there. The acquisition had literally just closed 2 weeks earlier. I was officially worth $2.8 billion, although the Forbes billionaire list wouldn't be published until the Friday after Thanksgiving. The timing felt almost poetic. I could have one final dinner as their disappointing daughter, then disappear again before they learned the truth about what I'd actually accomplished. I made some very strategic wardrobe and transportation choices for this trip. Instead of my Tesla Model S Plaid, with its distinctive falcon wing doors, I rented the most basic Honda Civic I could find. Instead of the designer clothes that now filled my walk-in closet, I packed simple outfits from Target and Old Navy. I left my $50,000 Patek Philippe watch, a gift to myself when we hit our first 100 million in revenue, at home, and wore a $20 Timex instead. Walking up to that house felt like traveling through time, but definitely not the good kind of time travel. The same manicured lawn, the same decorative shutters, the same oversized American flag hanging from the front porch. Everything exactly as I remembered it, frozen in amber like a museum exhibit of my childhood disappointments. Mom answered the door and practically tackled me with her hug. That single moment made the entire awkward trip feel worth it. Whatever else happened, I'd made my mother happy by coming home. "Everyone's here already," she said, dragging me inside with obvious excitement and relief. "I made your favorite green bean casserole. Well, I tried to make it. You know how I am with recipes." Everyone indeed. Michael was there with his wife Jessica and their 2 kids, Emma and Jake, who had grown so much since I'd last seen them that I barely recognized them. David had brought his girlfriend Ashley, a blonde marketing executive who I was meeting for the very first time. Various aunts and uncles and cousins filled up the living room, making small talk and pretending everything was normal. And there, holding court from his usual armchair like some kind of suburban king, was my father. Older than I remembered, his hair now completely gray, but still radiating that same authoritative presence that had intimidated me as a child. Sarah, just my name. No emotion, no warmth, no acknowledgement that he hadn't seen his daughter in 3 years, like he was simply noting the presence of a piece of furniture that had been moved back into its proper place. "Hi, Dad. Happy Thanksgiving." Michael approached me with this awkward half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you, sis. Still doing the app thing, I assume?" "Something like that, yeah." David was all charm and charisma, as usual, though I could see the uncertainty behind his practiced smile. "Look who it is. The prodigal daughter finally returns. How's that startup life treating you out there in Seattle?" Before I could even formulate an answer, Jessica jumped into the conversation with her fake sweet voice and perfectly practiced suburban smile. "It must be so nice having all that flexibility with your schedule. No boss breathing down your neck, no real deadlines to worry about. Like being permanently on vacation." Ashley nodded enthusiastically, like she was agreeing with some profound insight about the nature of entrepreneurship. "David tells me that tech startups are incredibly risky, though. Are you managing to make ends meet? Like, financially speaking? It must be so stressful not knowing where your next paycheck is coming from." The assumptions were crystal clear and absolutely brutal. In their minds, poor little Sarah was still chasing her silly computer dreams, probably living paycheck to paycheck in some tiny studio apartment, desperately pretending that her hobby was a real business while slowly burning through whatever savings she'd managed to accumulate. If they only knew that I'd made more money in the past month than their precious car dealership would generate in the next 100 years combined. The cruel irony was almost too perfect to be real. Dinner unfolded exactly as I expected. Same seating arrangements we'd had since childhood. Dad at the head like a king, Mom at the far end. My brothers flanking him like loyal advisors. He said grace in his booming voice, giving thanks for prosperity and sons who honor their father's legacy. The omission of daughters was deliberate, and it landed like a knife. Michael puffed out his chest as he carved his turkey. "We just opened our 4th location down in San Antonio. Revenue's up 30% year over year, and Houston is next." David jumped in, grinning. "Our customer satisfaction scores are the best in the state. We're not just selling cars, we're building lifelong relationships." Dad beamed at them, his pride practically glowing. "My boys know how to build something real and lasting." Jessica leaned toward me with that sugar-sweet tone that cut like glass. "It must be so nice having all that flexibility. Like being permanently on vacation." Ashley followed up, eyes wide with false concern. "David says startups are risky. Are you even making ends meet?" I set down my fork, forcing calm into my voice. "Actually, I run my own company full-time." Michael snorted. "Right, your little startup adventure. Are you actually making money yet? Or just burning through investor cash like every other Silicon Valley fantasy?" Dad finally turned his sharp gaze on me. 9 out of 10 technology companies fail within 5 years. I hope you've got a backup plan." David shook his head, almost pitying. "Come on, sis. Dad built something tangible. Cars, jobs, profits. Your digital stuff? It's just not the same." The weight of their words pressed down on the table like lead. I kept my voice steady, though my chest burned. "We're doing fine. Better than fine, actually." He stood up slowly and deliberately, tapping his wine glass with his butter knife in that ceremonial way. That meant he had something important to announce. The entire room fell into complete silence, like someone had pressed a mute button on the whole universe. Before we move on to dessert and football, I have an extremely important announcement to make about the future of Mitchell Auto Group and our family's legacy. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I knew exactly what was coming, but I was trapped there like a deer in headlights, unable to move or speak, or do anything but wait for the blow to fall. I've been working extensively with our family attorney over the past several months on comprehensive estate planning and succession strategies, he said in his most official business presentation voice. After very careful consideration and consultation with legal and financial experts, I've made some crucial decisions about inheritance and the future leadership of our company. Michael and David straightened up in their chairs like hunting dogs who'd just caught a scent. Their wives were practically glowing with anticipation, already mentally spending money they hadn't inherited yet. Michael, as my eldest son and current general manager, will inherit 60% of Mitchell Auto Group and assume the role of chief executive officer when I decide to retire in the next few years. The room erupted in applause and congratulations. Jessica squeezed Michael's hand so hard her knuckles went white. People were reaching across the table to shake his hand and pat him on the back, treating him like he'd just won an election instead of simply being born first. David will inherit the remaining 40% of the business and serve as president of operations. Together, they'll carry on the Mitchell family legacy for the next generation and continue the tradition of excellence we've built here. More applause, more congratulations, more celebration of the inevitable outcome that everyone had seen coming for decades. David's girlfriend Ashley was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement about suddenly becoming significantly wealthier by association. Then Dad's eyes found mine across the table, and I saw something cold and final in his expression, something that looked almost like satisfaction, like he'd been waiting years to deliver this particular blow. As for Sarah, the pause felt like it lasted for an entire year. Every single person in that room was staring at me, waiting to see how this would play out, whether I'd cry or argue or cause a scene. "You will not be receiving any inheritance from the family business or from my personal estate." The words landed like physical blows. The room went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears and the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere in the neighborhood. "You made your choice years ago when you decided to abandon this family and everything we've built here in Texas. The business should remain with the people who have actually contributed to its success and growth, who understand what it means to be part of something bigger than themselves." I felt my face burning with humiliation, but somehow I managed to keep my voice steady. "I understand completely. Maybe this reality check will finally motivate you to get serious about your life," he continued, twisting the knife deeper with surgical precision. "Stop chasing these ridiculous Silicon Valley fantasies and do something real and meaningful with your future. Find a man who can provide for you properly." That's when Michael decided it was time to completely pile on and destroy whatever dignity I had left. "Dad's absolutely right, Sarah. You've been playing dress up as a businesswoman for years now. It's way past time for you to grow up and face reality like the rest of us adults." I stood up slowly, my hands shaking slightly with rage and humiliation. "You people have absolutely no idea what I've accomplished." "Enough!" Michael shot up from his chair so violently that it nearly fell over backward. His face was bright red with rage, and I could see a vein pulsing in his forehead. "You're embarrassing yourself and this entire family. Sit down right now and accept reality for once in your pathetic life." He stepped toward me aggressively, and I refused to back down or show any weakness. "Don't you dare tell me what to do, Michael. You're being completely disrespectful to Dad after everything he's given you over the years." He grabbed my arm hard enough that I knew it would leave bruises, his fingers digging into my skin. "I will not stand here and let you. Get your hands off me right now." That's the moment when Michael completely and totally lost his mind. His hand came across my face in a sharp, echoing slap that stunned every single person in that room into absolute silence. The sound seemed to hang in the air forever. My cheek was on fire, and I touched it with my fingertips in complete disbelief that this had actually just happened in front of my entire extended family. "Michael," my mother screamed from across the table, her voice filled with horror and disbelief. "Jesus Christ, Michael," David said, finally finding his voice after staying silent through the entire confrontation. "You can't just hit her like that." Jessica was quickly ushering the kids out of the dining room, trying to shield them from the family meltdown they'd just witnessed. Ashley sat frozen in her chair, staring at the scene with her mouth hanging open in shock. But Michael wasn't finished. He was still seething with anger, his fists clenched at his sides like he was considering hitting me again. "She deserved every bit of that for disrespecting this family and everything Dad has built. Someone needed to put her in her place." I looked around that room one final time, at my father, who hadn't said a single word to condemn his son for hitting his daughter. At David, who was staring down at his plate like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen, unable to meet my eyes. At the family that had never, not once in 32 years, seen me as anything more than a disappointment and a burden. "You just made the biggest mistake of your entire life," I said quietly, my voice deadly calm despite the chaos around me. I picked up my purse and headed toward the front door, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor with each deliberate step. "Family," I said, turning back to look at them one last time, my hand on the door handle. "You actually call this a family?" I walked out of that house with my head held high, drove straight to Austin Bergstrom International Airport, and caught the very last flight back to Seattle. I had absolutely no idea that in less than 12 hours, their entire world was about to completely and utterly explode. Friday morning, November 24th. I was sitting in my penthouse apartment, looking out at the stunning view of Puget Sound while Mount Rainier stood majestically in the distance, sipping my morning coffee and reviewing some final acquisition paperwork, when my phone started buzzing nonstop with calls from blocked numbers. I ignored every single one of them, assuming they were spam or wrong numbers. Meanwhile, back in Austin, Ashley was scrolling through her social media feeds over breakfast, probably looking for Black Friday deals or holiday inspiration, when she let out a gasp so loud it could have woken the entire neighborhood. "David, you need to get over here and see this right now." She shoved her phone directly into his face, showing him the Forbes website homepage with its distinctive red banner and professional layout. "So what?" David mumbled, still half asleep and nursing what was probably a massive hangover from the previous night's family drama. "Forbes publishes stuff every day. Business news, stock market updates, whatever. Your sister is on the billionaire list." David sat up in bed like he'd been struck by lightning, suddenly completely alert. "What? That's completely impossible. There's no way. You must be confused. Look at this." Ashley scrolled down to my entry and turned the phone back toward him. There, in crisp black and white with the official Forbes formatting, was my professional headshot next to the text. "Sarah Mitchell, founder and former CEO of HealthBot AI, net worth $2.8 billion. "That has to be some kind of mistake," David said. But his voice was already starting to shake, with the realization that it probably wasn't. "There must be another Sarah Mitchell somewhere. It's a common name." "It's definitely her. Look at the photo. That's absolutely your sister. And see? It says she's from Austin, Texas, and it mentions MIT. That's exactly the school she went to. David, your sister is a billionaire." Within maybe 3 minutes, their family group chat completely exploded with notifications. "David, did anyone else see the Forbes billionaire list this morning?" "Michael, what Forbes list? I'm trying to sleep off this hangover from last night." "Ashley." Screenshot of my Forbes entry showing my photo and net worth. The silence that followed lasted exactly 30 seconds before all hell broke loose. "Michael, what the hell is this supposed to be?" "Jessica, $2.8 billion? That has to be wrong. There's no way." "Mom, how is this even possible? Is this really real?" "I don't understand, Dad." The typing indicator appeared and disappeared for several long minutes. "Dad, this has to be some kind of mistake or mix-up with someone else." But it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mix-up. It wasn't fake news or internet trolling. By 10 o'clock that morning, the story had been picked up by every major local Austin media outlet. Austin native becomes billionaire tech mogul. Local woman's AI company sold for nearly $3 billion. From car dealership family to Silicon Valley success story. Tech blogs and business publications were running detailed features about my incredible journey from small-town Texas to Silicon Valley success story. The Austin American-Statesman had already posted a breaking news article with the headline, "Austin tech entrepreneur Sarah Mitchell joins Forbes billionaire list." My father tried calling me immediately. The call went straight to an automated message informing him that his number had been blocked from reaching this device. He tried sending an email to my personal address. Auto response: "This contact has been permanently blocked from this email account." Michael tried reaching out through LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, every social media platform he could think of. I'd systematically blocked him on all of them years ago, and those blocks were still firmly in place. David tried creating fake accounts and reaching out through mutual acquaintances from high school and college. I'd anticipated that possibility and had already blocked anyone who might serve as a go-between. The irony was absolutely beautiful and perfectly poetic. For the first time in his entire life, Dad's precious car dealership business was getting major media attention and bringing recognition to the Mitchell name. And it was all because of my success. The daughter he'd just disowned and humiliated in front of the entire family was bringing more positive press to the Mitchell brand than he'd managed to generate in 40 years of business operations. And he couldn't even talk to me about it. By Saturday afternoon, the story had gone viral. Billionaire daughter was trending nationally, Reddit threads were dissecting every detail, and TikTok videos with titles like "Never Underestimate Women in Tech" were racking up millions of views. The narrative was brutal for my family, spreading like wildfire across every platform. Mitchell Auto Group's online presence was decimated. Google reviews flooded with one-star ratings, their Facebook page overwhelmed with furious comments. Customers canceled orders, and local competitors ran ads touting their commitment to family values and gender equality. Michael's personal life fell apart almost immediately. Other parents at his kids' private schools started actively avoiding him at pickup and drop-off, whispering about him being the guy who hit his billionaire sister. His country club friends stopped returning his phone calls and text messages. Jessica was absolutely mortified every time she left the house, knowing that people were talking about her husband as that abusive brother from the news. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I decided to give exactly one interview to a business publication. Just one, carefully planned and strategically timed for maximum impact. "Success has always been about so much more than money for me," I told the TechCrunch reporter during our video call from my Seattle office. "It's about proving that innovation and determination matter more than old-fashioned prejudices and gender stereotypes. As for my family situation, I've always believed in focusing on building the future rather than relitigating the past." When the reporter asked me directly about being cut from the inheritance, I kept my response simple and devastatingly effective. I think the results speak for themselves. Sometimes the best revenge really is massive success. That single quote got picked up and shared everywhere. It was the lead story on every local Austin news broadcast that evening. It got retweeted hundreds of thousands of times across social media platforms. It was quoted in business magazines, included in think pieces about women in technology, and turned into inspirational memes that spread across Instagram and Pinterest. And it absolutely destroyed what little remained of my family's public dignity. The final twist of the knife came when I announced the creation of the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, a $100 million initiative specifically designed to provide full college scholarships for young women pursuing degrees in STEM fields. The press conference was held at a downtown Austin hotel, exactly 23 minutes from my family's house, but I didn't bother telling them I was in town. "Too many brilliant young women are told their dreams don't matter," I said from the podium, looking directly into the cameras. "Too many are denied opportunities because of outdated beliefs about what women can and should achieve. This foundation will ensure that financial barriers never prevent a deserving young woman from pursuing her education and her dreams." The Austin American-Statesman ran a full front-page story about the foundation and its mission. The University of Texas immediately offered me an honorary doctorate in computer science. My old high school called to ask if they could rename their computer lab the Sarah Mitchell Innovation Center. For the first time in my entire life, I was getting recognition and respect in my hometown that had absolutely nothing to do with my family's approval or acceptance. The validation felt incredible, and the timing was absolutely perfect. 2 months after that Thanksgiving disaster, My mother had a serious health scare. Stress-induced heart palpitations and severe anxiety attacks landed her in the hospital for 3 days. The doctors said her blood pressure was dangerously high and warned that if she didn't find ways to manage her stress, she could be looking at a heart attack or stroke. That's when my father made a decision that I never could have imagined in a million years. He started going to therapy. "I need to understand why I treated you the way I did for all those years," he told his therapist during their very first session, according to what my mother later shared with me. "And more importantly, I need to figure out how to fix the damage I've caused to my family." Michael was essentially forced into court-mandated anger management classes after the slapping incident became widely publicized, and someone at the dinner party filed a police report. The public humiliation was eating him alive from the inside, but it was also forcing him to confront some extremely ugly truths about his behavior and attitudes toward women. David surprised absolutely everyone by announcing that he was leaving Mitchell Auto Group entirely to start his own independent marketing and consulting firm. "I can't be part of this toxic environment anymore," he told our father during what was apparently a very heated confrontation in Dad's office. "What we did to Sarah was completely unforgivable, and I need to build something better for myself." The family business that had been the absolute center of their universe for decades was literally crumbling under the weight of their own dysfunction and bad decisions. Employee morale was at an all-time low. Sales had dropped by 40%. 2 of their 4 locations were struggling to stay profitable. Meanwhile, my life was flourishing in ways I'd never imagined possible. HealthBot AI was now serving over 50 million users globally across 6 different countries. We were expanding into new areas of mental health support, developing AI-assisted therapy programs, and partnering with major hospital systems worldwide. I'd moved from my penthouse to an even larger place with stunning views of Mount Rainier and the Olympic Mountains. The new house had a home office overlooking the water where I could work on my foundation projects and mentorship programs. I was dating this wonderful man, a marine biologist named James, who knew me as Sarah the person, not Sarah the billionaire, and who genuinely didn't care about my net worth. But despite everything that had happened, despite the public humiliation they'd brought on themselves, the letters and messages from my family kept coming in a steady stream. My father wrote these long, rambling apologies that were clearly mixed with transparent attempts to reconnect for business and financial purposes. "I've been thinking about potential partnerships between our companies," he'd write after paragraphs of supposed remorse. "Your technology could revolutionize the automotive industry." Michael's emails grew increasingly desperate and panicked as the social and professional costs of his behavior continued to mount week after week. His children were being teased at school about their father being the mean uncle who hit Aunt Sarah. Jessica was threatening divorce if he didn't fix the situation somehow. David's letters seemed genuinely remorseful and self-reflective, filled with specific acknowledgments of his mistakes and detailed plans for how he wanted to change. Although I wasn't entirely sure I could trust that his change of heart was completely authentic, rather than motivated by the social and business consequences he was facing. And my mother's messages absolutely broke my heart. Simple, honest texts about missing me, about her deep regrets, about desperately wanting to be part of my life again. "I know I failed you," she wrote in one particularly emotional message. "I should have protected you. I should have stood up to your father. I was a coward, and you paid the price for my weakness." I spent months working with my own therapist, a brilliant woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in family trauma and emotional healing, trying to process decades of accumulated hurt and disappointment while figuring out what, if anything, I actually wanted to do about my family relationships. The conclusion I eventually reached surprised even me. 6 months after that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, I found myself back in Austin for a business meeting. My company was seriously considering opening a satellite office here to tap into the incredible tech talent that the city was producing, and I was personally scouting locations and meeting with potential hires. Austin had changed dramatically since I'd left for college. The tech industry had exploded here, bringing in thousands of brilliant engineers and entrepreneurs. The city that had once felt small and limiting now buzzed with innovation and possibility. On a complete impulse, sitting in my rental car outside a potential office building, I pulled out my phone and sent my mother a text message. I'm in town for work today. Would you like to have coffee, just you and me? She responded within literally 2 minutes. Yes, absolutely yes. Anywhere you want, whenever works for you. I can be wherever you need me to be in 15 minutes. We arranged to meet at this small independent cafe called Radio Coffee and Beer in downtown Austin, far away from the family business and the suburban neighborhood where I'd grown up feeling so misunderstood and undervalued. When I walked into that cafe, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked smaller somehow, older, worn down by months of stress and guilt and regret. The confident, put-together woman I remembered from childhood, the one who'd always had perfect hair and coordinated outfits, had been replaced by someone who seemed fragile and uncertain. She stood up immediately when she saw me, and tears were already forming in her eyes before I'd even reached her table. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice catching with emotion, "you actually came. I wasn't sure you would after everything that's happened." We sat across from each other in this awkward silence for a long moment, both of us unsure how to begin a conversation that was 6 months and 32 years in the making. "I owe you the biggest, most sincere apology of my entire life," she began, her voice shaking with emotion that she'd clearly been holding back for months. "I failed you as a mother in every possible way. I stood by and let your father dismiss your dreams, your intelligence, your worth as a human being. I prioritized keeping peace in my marriage over protecting my own daughter, and I will regret that choice for the rest of my life." She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't making excuses or trying to justify her behavior or explain away decades of enabling. She was simply acknowledging the truth of what had happened and taking full responsibility for her part in it. "I kept a folder," she continued, reaching into her purse and pulling out this worn, thick manila envelope that looked like it had been handled hundreds of times. "Every article about you and your company, every mention in the news, every blog post I could find. I've been following your success story for years, Sarah. I was so incredibly proud of everything you were accomplishing, and so deeply ashamed that I never had the courage to tell you that." Inside the folder were dozens and dozens of printouts, newspaper articles, magazine features, blog posts, even screenshots of social media mentions of my work and achievements. The pages were organized chronologically, starting with a small mention in the MIT alumni newsletter about my graduation and ending with recent coverage of the acquisition. She'd been quietly tracking my entire journey, while the rest of the family dismissed and ignored it.
"I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she closed the folder. "I don't expect you to want any kind of relationship with me after everything that's happened. I just needed you to know that I see you now. I see how absolutely incredible you are, how strong and brilliant and successful you've become, and how completely wrong we all were about everything." For the first time in many months, I felt something other than anger and resentment toward my family, something that might have been the beginning of healing. "I appreciate you saying that, Mom. I really do, and it means more than you know." We ended up talking for over 2 hours, not about money or business or the company or any of the drama that had consumed our family for the past 6 months. Just about life, about dreams and aspirations, about the woman I'd become and the mother she wished she'd been brave enough to be all those years ago. She told me about her own dreams that she'd given up when she got married, how she'd wanted to be a teacher, but Dad had convinced her that wives should focus on supporting their husbands' careers. She talked about watching me struggle as a child and teenager, knowing I was brilliant and driven, but feeling powerless to advocate for me against my father's rigid expectations. "I was raised to believe that a good wife never contradicted her husband," she said, tears flowing freely now. "But I should have been a good mother first. I should have protected you." When I finally left that cafe and walked back to my rental car, I felt lighter and more at peace than I had in years. The conversation hadn't magically fixed everything, but it had opened a door that I'd thought was permanently closed. It's been a full year now since that Thanksgiving dinner that changed absolutely everything about my family's dynamics and my own understanding of success and forgiveness. My relationship with them is still complicated and fragile, but it's slowly, carefully healing in some unexpected ways. My mother and I talk regularly now, real conversations about real things, not the superficial catch-ups we used to have. She's found her voice in her marriage,
and has started standing up to my father when he slips back into his old patterns of thinking. She's even joined the board of directors for my foundation, and she's become one of our most passionate advocates for supporting young women in STEM. I can't change the past, she told me during one of our recent calls, but I can make sure other mothers don't make the same mistakes I did. David and I have managed to reconnect as well. He followed through on leaving the family business, went to therapy to address his own issues with entitlement and sexism, and seems genuinely committed to becoming a better person. He's building his own success now with his marketing firm, and I have a lot of respect for the fact that he's doing it independently rather than relying on family money or connections. I was raised to think that being a man meant dismissing women's achievements, he admitted during a long phone conversation we had a few months ago. I'm trying to unlearn that programming and become someone better. Michael is still Michael in a lot of ways. He's apologized repeatedly, but those apologies feel calculated and strategic, rather than genuinely heartfelt. He's struggling both professionally and socially as the consequences of his behavior continue to follow him around Austin. And I honestly think his remorse is more about those consequences than about any real change in his character or values. His anger management classes have helped somewhat. He's learned to control his temper better, but I don't think he's fundamentally changed his beliefs about women or success. Maybe that will evolve with more time and continued therapy, but maybe it won't. Some people change, and some people just learn to hide their true nature better. My father rewrote his will to include me as an equal heir to everything, although I've made it crystal clear that I don't want or need his money. Keep it, I told him bluntly during one of our stilted phone conversations. Give it to Michael and David. I've built my own legacy. He's been going to therapy consistently, which is definitely progress, but decades of ingrained attitudes and prejudices don't change overnight. We maintain a cordial but distant relationship when we interact. Trust, I've learned, is something that has to be earned over time through consistent actions, not simply inherited through family connections or restored through apologies. The family business itself is still struggling significantly. It turns out that treating family members badly isn't great for your public image, especially in the age of social media and viral stories that can destroy reputations overnight. They've had to hire an expensive public relations firm to try to manage the ongoing fallout, but their sales numbers are still down by almost 40% from where they were before Thanksgiving. Several longtime employees have quit, citing the toxic family culture and their discomfort working for people who'd been publicly exposed as abusive. 2 of their 4 dealership locations have actually closed permanently, unable to recover from the combination of reduced customer traffic and increased operating costs. Meanwhile, HealthBot AI continues to grow and expand in ways that still sometimes feel surreal to me. We're moving into new areas of mental health support and AI-assisted therapy programs. We're partnering with major hospital systems across 3 continents. We're developing new technologies that could revolutionize how people access mental health care globally. And yes, I did end up opening that Austin office. Not for my family's sake, but because the city really is producing some of the most brilliant tech talent in the country. We now employ over 200 people in Austin, many of them young women who remind me of myself at their age. Brilliant, ambitious, and determined to change the world. I've also started personally mentoring young women in STEM fields. Through my foundation, every scholarship recipient I meet, every successful female entrepreneur I'm able to help along their journey, feels like a small victory for that 18-year-old girl who was told her dreams didn't matter because she wasn't born male. The foundation has already provided full scholarships to over 200 young women, and we're just getting started. We're building coding boot camps in underserved communities, funding research projects led by female scientists, and creating mentorship networks that connect successful women in tech with the next generation. It's the kind of systemic change I wish had existed when I was struggling to pay for MIT and questioning whether I was smart enough to succeed in a male-dominated field. But here's what I really want you to understand, especially if you're watching this and you've ever been in a similar situation where family members dismissed your dreams or told you to be more realistic about your goals. Success, real, meaningful success, isn't about proving other people wrong, even though I'll admit that can be deeply satisfying. Success is about proving yourself right. It's about betting on your own potential and your own vision, even when the people who are supposed to love and support you refuse to see it or actively work against it. The family you're born into absolutely shapes who you become, but it doesn't have to define the limits of what you can achieve. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is create healthy distance from people who consistently undervalue your worth and potential. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate and people are genuinely willing to grow and change, you might find a way back to each other that's actually healthier than what you had before. But you should never, ever compromise your dreams or dim your light to make other people more comfortable. Not your parents, not your siblings, not your spouse, not anyone. The girl who was told smart girls become teachers or nurses, not engineers, just donated $100 million to make sure other girls never have to hear those limiting words again. And that feels infinitely better than any inheritance or family approval ever could. You know what's funny? That dry turkey I mentioned at the beginning. My mom asked me what I wanted for Christmas dinner this year, the first time she's ever asked for my input on a family meal planning decision. I told her I'd handle the cooking this time. We're doing Christmas at my new Austin house this year. A beautiful place in the hills overlooking the city, with enough space for the family members who've put in the real work to repair our relationships. Just the people who've earned their place at my table through genuine change and effort. Michael wasn't invited. My father will be there, but he knows he's on probation and that his continued presence depends on his behavior. David's bringing his girlfriend, and Mom's bringing her famous, terrible cranberry sauce, because some traditions are worth keeping, even the questionable ones. It's going to be different, smaller but healthier, built on mutual respect instead of inherited obligation or fear of consequences. So here's my question for all of you watching this. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own dreams? Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who should have believed in you from the beginning? Have you ever built something amazing while people who claim to love you were betting against your success? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one, and honestly, your experiences and your courage inspire me more than you could ever know. And if you're currently in a situation where people are telling you your dreams are too big, your goals are unrealistic, or your path is too unconventional, please remember that their limitations aren't your limitations. Their lack of vision doesn't determine your reality. Their fear of change doesn't have to become your ceiling. Sometimes the best thing you can do is succeed so loudly and so brilliantly that the people who doubted you have no choice but to finally see your worth. Hit that subscribe button if this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, and remember, you're the CEO of your own life. Don't let anyone else convince you to accept a demotion. I'll see you in the next video. Keep building your empire, whatever that looks like for you. The people who matter will eventually figure out your worth, and the ones who don't, well, their loss is someone else's gain. Thanks for listening to my story. Now go out there and write your own incredible ending.